Zhou Xiaoli lay in the ambulance, clutching Zhang Wu's hand, tears streaming down her face as she asked, "Did you call my mom? When can they come?" Zhang Wu replied softly, "Well, it might take a while. Your water broke suddenly, and they had booked their flights based on your expected due date. Now, with the holiday rush, we can't even get plane or train tickets here." Zhou Xiaoli sobbed even harder, and Zhang Wu tried to comfort her, saying, "Don't worry, my dear. Your parents can't make it, but my parents and siblings are all here. We have enough help. Besides, it's just childbirth. Your checkups have been fine, and it's not a complicated case. We've got experienced medical professionals." Zhang Wu, a straightforward man, wore his nervousness and joy about impending fatherhood on his face. He struggled to empathize with Zhou Xiaoli, even attempting to keep his mouth from curving into a smile, making his expression appear insincere. Frustrated, Zhou Xiaoli slapped him and said, "What do you mean by just childbirth? Look at your attitude. How can I not think about my parents? When a woman gives birth, it's like going through a life and death experience." Zhang Wu quickly conceded, "You're right, my words were clumsy. I'm sorry. Just keep calm, everything will be fine." Zhou Xiaoli had no choice but to face the situation. Her family couldn't make it, and she had to focus on delivering the baby. When they arrived at the hospital, Zhang Wu's parents and his siblings were already there, forming a sizable group. However, they seemed to be in the way, blocking the corridor. After a stern reprimand from the doctor, they retreated but remained anxious, following Zhou Xiaoli to the delivery room. Zhang Wu had arranged for a private room for Zhou Xiaoli, making it easier for the family to wait. At first, they were all very nervous and surrounded Zhou Xiaoli. However, after a couple of hours with no sign of labor, their attention shifted to other topics. "Your aunt's old sow just had a litter of piglets. They're selling one for 1,500, and they're in great demand in the neighborhood. Our neighbor Zhang Yi went back to his hometown. I heard he was caught red-handed with a widow. This time, he went back to mediate the situation. I've seen that widow, she's not what you'd expect. The two captains of our dance team in the community are always at odds. I bet they'll split up soon. I'll join the team led by old Zhang, he used to be a professional dancer." Everyone started chatting about various things, and they didn't notice that someone had brought in melon seeds. The crisp cracking sound of seeds being shelled was like a continuous firecracker, exploding near Zhou Xiaoli's ears. She became increasingly annoyed and frustrated. How could they be so casual at a time like this? Zhou Xiaoli thought, feeling irritated that her family was eating melon seeds and chatting instead of worrying about her. If they were her biological family, they would be pestering the doctor, asking why she hadn't started labor yet. Zhou Xiaoli turned away, wiping her tears. Zhang Wu, like an indifferent spectator, remained engrossed in the conversations around him. After a while, his sister quietly suggested, "Zhang Wu, why hasn't Zhou Xiaoli shown any signs of labor yet? When I had my second child, my water broke, and I started having contractions immediately. Why don't you go ask the doctor?" Two women, sharing the experience of childbirth, were the only ones who could truly empathize with Zhou Xiaoli at this moment. However, Zhang Wu responded, "The doctor just said it's okay for now. We'll wait a bit longer, and if there's no progress, they'll consider using oxytocin." Zhou Xiaoli felt the urge to slap him hard. What did he mean by "it's okay"? Was giving birth such a trivial matter? If there was a problem, it would be too late. The family endured through the evening, but Zhou Xiaoli showed no signs of progress. By this time, they had exhausted all the conversations, and the melon seeds were gone. The whole family was exhausted, waiting. Zhou Xiaoli dozed off for a while and woke up to find that her belly was unusually quiet. She gently touched her belly, but the baby didn't respond. Panic seized her, and she called out, "Zhang Wu! Zhang Wu! The baby isn't moving. You need to find a doctor." The entire family was alarmed, and even Zhang Wu, though initially dismissive, began to worry. He said, don't worry, I'll find a doctor right away." But the doctor just did a fetal heart rate check, and everything was normal. When the doctor arrived, they checked the fetal heart rate again, and it was still normal. It seemed the baby was asleep. However, Zhou Xiaoli's emotions were unstable, and with her water having broken for a while, they decided to administer oxytocin. 2 hours later, Zhou Xiaoli finally started experiencing contractions. She wasn't good at handling pain. Even when she accidentally cut her hand while chopping vegetables, she would scream and shout for a long time. Childbirth pain was on another level, and her cries of agony attracted the attention of pregnant women passing by, making them all anxious. After a round of painful contractions, her mother-in-law suggested, "Xiaoli, you need to eat something quickly, not eating will make it harder to give birth." Her sister-in-law added, "Mom cares not only for the baby but also for your well-being. I've been through this, and childbirth is truly exhausting." At first, Zhang Wu was light-hearted, but as time passed, and he saw Zhou Xiaoli sweating and turning pale, he became concerned. However, he didn't know how to help. He didn't have any experience in this, and he was too afraid to use his phone to look up information, fearing that Zhou Xiaoli would scold him for playing with his phone when she was in pain. So, he wandered around like a headless fly, trying to express genuine concern and care through his presence. He did attempt to find a doctor, but the doctors were all busy with these cases every day. When he went to get one, the doctor would take a look and leave, not staying specifically for one expectant mother. Resources in the hospital were limited, and there were so many children to be born. While Zhou Xiaoli was in excruciating pain, her face covered in sweat and tears, and her body messy and disheveled, she realized that in this raw and vulnerable state, she was closer to the essence of life than ever before. Zhou Xiaoli endured the ordeal and finally reached 3 centimeters of dilation. She was then moved from the ward to the delivery room, marking a significant breakthrough. In the delivery room, no family members were allowed to accompany her. As she faced the imminent birth alone, something within her transformed. She no longer appeared weak, and her fear was replaced by courage. She understood that she needed to be brave, to follow the doctor's instructions, to bring her baby safely into the world. Despite her disheveled appearance, sweat, and tears, she felt surrounded by a radiant aura of motherly love, a sense of calm and security. Her contractions became regular, but due to a shortage of anesthetists at the hospital, the planned pain relief was not available. Zhou Xiaoli bit her lip and embraced the pain, using the mantra, "The body is meant to endure suffering." With every contraction, she screamed loudly, attracting the attention of other pregnant women who were now also becoming anxious. During a break from the pain, her mother-in-law suggested, "Xiaoli, you need to eat something quickly. Not eating will leave you too weak to give birth." Her sister-in-law added, "Mom is concerned not only about the baby but also for your well-being. I've been through this, and childbirth is truly exhausting." At first, Zhang Wu was cheerful, but as he watched Zhou Xiaoli sweat and turn pale, he began to fear. However, he had never seen anything like this, so using his phone to look up information didn't seem appropriate. Later, Zhou Xiaoli would probably scold him for playing with his phone when she was in pain. Thus, he wandered around like a headless fly, attempting to show his concern and care through his presence. He did try to find a doctor, but the doctors were busy with cases like these every day. When he brought one, the doctor would glance and leave, not staying specifically for one expectant mother. Hospital resources were limited, and many babies needed to be born. Zhou Xiaoli sweated, cried, and, in between contractions, devoured chocolate bars. She even thought about taking photos as a memento but quickly abandoned the idea. Her body was far from presentable, and she felt that capturing this moment on camera was unnecessary. She suddenly recalled her sister-in-law's words. She had once told her that during labor, a woman ceased to be a person and became solely a vessel for giving birth. At that time, dignity and self-esteem were the last things on her mind. Now, Zhou Xiaoli understood this from her own experience. A person, at that moment, reverted to their most primitive self. Despite enduring considerable pain, Zhou Xiaoli reached 8 centimeters of dilation. She was then moved from the ward to the delivery room. As she was wheeled toward the operating room, Zhou Xiaoli felt herself on the verge of breaking down. Reaching 8 centimeters and then opting for a cesarean section meant facing more suffering and risk. Her whole family accompanied her to the operating room, looking somber. Her mother-in-law was already in tears. This straightforward, no-nonsense old lady might be crying out of fear, but her tears fell on Zhou Xiaoli's heart, making her feel understood and cared for. Outside the operating room, Zhou Xiaoli began to feel anxious. She grabbed Zhang Wu's hand and asked, "Have my parents arrived yet?" Zhang Wu replied, "Wife, they haven't." Zhou Xiaoli said, "Then don't tell them that I'm having a C-section. They won't make it in time, and they'll worry." Zhang Wu said, "Oh, I already told them." Zhou Xiaoli sighed, "Okay, let it be." Zhang Wu said, "Don't worry, my dear. Everything will be fine." Zhou Xiaoli wanted to say more, but the doctor promptly pushed her into the operating room. As she was lifted onto the operating table, Zhou Xiaoli had regained her composure. She felt the anesthesia spreading through her body, making her lower half numb. The icy surgical blade cut through her abdomen layer by layer, and the doctor's hands delved into her body as if they were scooping something out. At 9:25 a.m. that day, she became a mother. The doctor placed the baby, covered in vernix and wailing, in front of her, allowing her to identify the gender and bring their faces close. Tears welled up in her eyes. Yet, in this sacred and profound moment, her thoughts were, oh dear, it's a girl. She takes after her dad. The baby was taken away for cleaning, and her attention was drawn to the doctor's seemingly casual yet skilled hands. She wanted to remind the doctor, you're washing a baby, not a dish, but she managed to hold back. After the baby was cleaned, she was brought out of the operating room, and the doctor started to suture her. Everything went smoothly. Her internal organs were returning to their places, and all the pain she had endured seemed like a fleeting memory. Now, she had transformed back into the charming yet formidable Zhou Xiaoli. After the surgery, Zhou Xiaoli was wheeled out of the operating room. A group of people gathered around, but after confirming that she was not their family member, they dispersed. The doctor called out loudly, family of Zhou Xiaoli. Her mother-in-law and her brother's wife gathered around. Zhou Xiaoli couldn't find Zhang Wu and was about to ask, but her sister-in-law explained, the baby has to undergo an examination on the second floor, and it's a hospital rule that only the biological father can accompany. So, he had to go with her dad. That's why he couldn't wait for you. Zhou Xiaoli sighed, women really understand women. It didn't take long for Zhou Xiaoli to return to the ward, and the baby was also brought back. There hadn't been a girl in the Zhang family for several generations, so the sudden arrival of one was met with curiosity. They gathered around the baby but were cautious not to touch her, except for her sister-in-law, who was more confident. Zhang Wu looked like a bewildered deer, fumbling around in excitement, unsure of where to place his hands and feet. Finally, his attentive sister-in-law led him to the bedside. Tears welled up in Zhang Wu's eyes as he looked at Zhou Xiaoli. He said, oh my, I'm so excited right now. My heart is racing, and I can't calm down. You've suffered, my dear. Zhou Xiaoli asked, is our daughter healthy? Zhang Wu replied, everything is normal, don't worry. So, what's next? You guide us. Zhou Xiaoli closed her eyes and said, I'm so tired. You can ask my sister-in-law, she knows. Zhang Wu agreed, alright, take a rest. Zhou Xiaoli had a good sleep, and she was awakened by a nurse pressing on her belly. The excruciating pain that followed was as if it squeezed the tears right out of her eyes. She had no concern for her appearance, she screamed in agony, which also startled the baby, causing her to cry. Childbirth was excruciatingly painful, and Zhou Xiaoli had no desire to go through it again. Little did she know that the pain from the abdominal compression was just the beginning. When the anesthesia wore off, the incision site started to hurt. They had to use a pain relief pump to provide some relief. In the middle of the night, her lower back felt like it had been snapped in half, and the pain was so intense that she couldn't even breathe. This pain even overshadowed the pain from the incision. Unable to bear it any longer, she sent Zhang Wu to the nurse's station to request a painkiller. The second day, Zhou Xiaoli was urged by the nurse to start moving around. She carefully supported her belly and sat up. After a moment of dizziness, with the assistance of Zhang Wu, she slowly took her first steps. At that moment, she felt like she was on the verge of death. She couldn't support her own body, her breath was shallow, and with each step, her internal organs protested loudly in unfamiliar positions. Just a few steps and her hospital gown was soaked with cold sweat. Thankfully, she managed to release gas that day, a minor relief. She knew that there was still breastfeeding and many other tasks ahead of her. Bringing a life into this world, nurturing it, and watching it grow was a painful yet joyful process. Her mother, mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and many other experienced women had all advised her on this. However, the weight of those words could only truly be understood through first-hand experience. On the day Zhou Xiaoli was discharged, in the neighboring single room, a mature mother was dealing with liquefied incisions. In the three-person room next door, a mother who had longed for a son gave birth to an unwanted daughter, with a torn birth canal, and only her biological mother to care for her. Another pregnant woman, 6 months into her pregnancy, faced the prospect of induced labor due to fetal abnormalities. There was also a third-time expectant mother who not only had to remind her oldest child at elementary school to complete their English reading assignments via WeChat but also instruct her family to help her second child with kindergarten homework. In the human experience, sorrows and joys rarely overlap. Only the continuity of life remains constant. On the second day of her postpartum confinement at home, her parents from her maiden family finally arrived. The elderly couple couldn't secure plane tickets or direct train tickets. They had to make a long and circuitous journey with 2 train transfers. At the time, Zhou Xiaoli was breastfeeding, holding her child while looking at her mother at the door. The mother and daughter began to cry together. In a way, she wished she could go back in time and tell her younger self not to marry far away. To inform her that when she had a child, her parents might not be able to make it in time. Her mother-in-law whispered from behind, "Don't cry, it's not appropriate to cry during confinement. You'll ruin your eyes." After wiping away her tears, Zhou's mother said, "Your mother-in-law is right." In the evening, Zhou's mother moved into Zhou Xiaoli's room to take care of her. Her mother-in-law and father-in-law returned to their own home, showing some consideration. After Zhou Xiaoli finished breastfeeding, she called Zhang Wu into the room. The tall and sturdy Zhang Wu smelled fresh from a shower, a small towel draped over his broad shoulder. He rubbed his hands together and said, "Give me the baby, I'll burp her for you." Zhou's mother watched as Zhang Wu awkwardly held the baby, allowing her to lie on his shoulder. She was so worried that she stood nearby, ready to catch the baby in case he dropped her. She said, "How can you hold her upright right after birth?" Zhou Xiaoli explained, "Mom, this is not holding her upright, it's burping her. If we don't burp her, she might choke on milk. We've both learned from professionals, so don't worry, we're burping her." Zhou's mother didn't say much and watched as Zhang Wu burped the baby. She looked at all the baby supplies prepared by Zhou Xiaoli and said with a contented smile, "On the way here, I thought things at home might be chaotic, but it seems to be going well. Being a parent is no child's play, you've learned what responsibility means." Zhou Xiaoli blushed and smiled shyly, "Well, it's like herding ducks. What else can we do?" Zhou's mother went outside and came back with 2 large red envelopes for Zhou Xiaoli. Zhou Xiaoli accepted them with a happy smile and opened them. One envelope contained 20,000 renminbi in cash, and the other held a gold longevity lock. Zhou Xiaoli wanted to return the money, but Zhou's mother said, "Keep it. You'll understand in the future. You didn't give birth to a child, you've given birth to a money-eating machine. You'll be tight on cash before you know it." Zhou Xiaoli hugged her mother and choked out, "Mom." Zhou's mother patted her and comforted her, saying, "I always feel like you're still a child, and in the blink of an eye, you've become a child's mother. From now on, you have to act like a mother and can't be willful anymore. You have to take on the responsibility." Zhou Xiaoli didn't say anything and held her mother tightly, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. In that moment, she wanted to act like a child once again, confide in her mother, and complain. She wanted to be able to call out for her mother when needed and even when there was no need, just to say "Mom." She would be willful this time, and then, like her mother raised her, she would nurture her own daughter, without worrying about the future, giving love, time, money, and respect, making her an independent individual, ready to face the storms and be there for her, even if they were miles apart.